Have you tried nibbling on saltines and eating ginger? Hi everyone, thank you for coming back to my channel. Today I wanted to share some tips for the first trimester of pregnancy. I am currently in my third trimester, but I have experienced the first trimester 3 different times, and so I do have some good tips and tricks on how to get through it, things you might need, and just dealing with extreme morning sickness. So a little bit of history here. When my mom was pregnant with me, my sister, and my brother, every single time she had a condition called Hyperemesis Gravidarum, and some people pronounce it different ways. It's abbreviated HG, and basically it's characterized by extreme nausea and vomiting during pregnancy. And while many women experience being nauseous or difficulty eating, this is just on a very extreme level. So for her, I was 10 years old when my brother and sister around when they were born, so I was able to see her throughout her pregnancy, and she was completely miserable. And I just knew from her how she was, and a lot of times hyperemesis is hereditary, so that was what I knew of pregnancy, and I just assumed that yes, most likely when I would have kids of my own, that's how it would be. And real quick before I get into the tips, one really cool thing that stuck out to me was this time where I was pregnant with my son, and I had ran into this doctor friend of our families that we knew, and I, had told him how my mom had hyperemesis, and I think that's what I had. And he asked me how many kids she had, and I said, well, 3. And he said, wow, normally people with that condition don't go on to have any more kids if they even get through the first kid. And that was really crazy to me. I didn't realize that a lot of people, it affects them so negatively that they will refuse to have kids in the future, or unfortunately will terminate the pregnancy because they're just so miserable. Just so sad and heartbreaking on a number of levels. But one thing that I love about my mom is that this was, and again, growing up, this is all I knew of pregnancy because of her. I mean, the idea of somebody not being miserably sick was just not something that I had been around. So she, I saw how sick she was and miserable, and how difficult the pregnancy was for her. She really couldn't do much of anything but sit by the toilet the entire time, pretty much. And I said to her, wow, like after going through all that, how do you have kids? Like why? And she's like, as soon as they put that baby in your arms, it's all worth it. And sorry, I'm pregnant and hormonal, so I'm getting emotional. But I just thought that was so beautiful, and it's so true. And for me, with my first baby, I ended up miscarrying, but I definitely had it then. And then with my son, who's now a year old, I certainly had it, and I was sick the entire time. Day 1 that I found out that I was pregnant, and up until the day before he was born, I was very sick. But it's so true that, because a lot of people would ask me like, gosh, are you sure you want to have more kids? Because they knew I want to have a lot of kids. Like, are you sure now that you've experienced that? And it's completely worth it. I mean, and now I was very sick. I mean, there were periods of days, and I'm not exaggerating, days. I did not leave my spot on the ground right by the bathroom, except to like move a couple inches over to like throw up. So sorry, it's kind of gross. But so I was very sick, and it gets to the point where you can become dehydrated, and I was like very close to being at the point of hospitalization, but I just took all the right steps so that I didn't have to be, and I was able to get some fluids in eventually. But some people do have to be hospitalized, and it can go as far as having to be fed through an IV. So most people don't experience this in their pregnancies, and most people are not very sensitive to it. I know a lot of people thought my mom might have been exaggerating her symptoms, and same for me, but it's very real and very life-altering and crazy. And actually, Princess Kate Middleton has this condition, and so what's kind of cool about that is it was able to be brought up into the public light a little bit more. So I think since that happened, people became a little more accepting of it, because I remember with my mom, people just thought she was kind of like a baby or exaggerating, but no, it is very real, very serious. And the thing about it is all your little helpful tips that you hear from well-meaning people about how to avoid pregnancy sickness, none of those tips work, no matter how hard you try, and there's nothing you can do, and it's pretty much unexplainable. But there are some things that did help me, and everybody's different, but I would like to share with you what helped me get through and survive the first trimester, especially as somebody with extreme morning sickness. So the first thing that everybody will probably say to you if you're in your first trimester and they find out that you're expecting is that their great tip they have for you is to nibble on saltine crackers and to always have snacks on hand. And that is actually really awesome advice, and I think that's why so many people say it, because for a lot of people that can totally make everything better. Now, it does help, and if you're doing a little bit better in your time of being sick, it can work wonders. And so it's always good to have food on hand to nibble. And for me, I had very strong aversions with my son, where I couldn't even look at certain foods that I used to love. I couldn't even look at cans that had a label in the color red for some bizarre reason when I was pregnant with him. And so there were just a lot of bizarre aversions that I had that I didn't know was part of being pregnant. Like, I could literally look at a food that I normally enjoyed my whole entire life and just, I couldn't even see it or be around it or be near it. And sometimes that just happens. So I encourage you to keep on hand a few different types of crackers, maybe one that's a little more sweet, one that's a little more salty, like a graham cracker and a saltine. And that way, if you kind of are sick of one and want the other, it's available to you. And I would keep those snacks by your bedside, and sometimes even before you get up for the day, if you just nibble on a cracker or just get a little something in your stomach, it can really help you have your day off to a better start and not be so sick as soon as you get up. Another thing that I found beneficial was Gatorade. And you can drink Gatorade. That's what a lot of people will recommend doing. But for me, when I got to my worst point of not being able to keep down any liquids or foods, what I would do is I would take Gatorade and I would put it into an ice cube tray. And actually my husband probably did this for me because I could barely walk and do stuff. But we would freeze the Gatorade cubes, and then I would suck on the cube of Gatorade. And that was not only soothing, but it helped get the Gatorade into me. And normally I'm not a big Gatorade person. I just look at it and think it's probably filled with dyes and stuff. But I don't know what it is about the electrolytes or whatever ingredients are in there. It was the only thing I could even consume for days. And so it really got me through and kept me hydrated. Keeping hydrated, of course, it's always good to have a water bottle on hand with you. I love my Swell water bottle because it keeps my drink cold even if I'm going into a hotter area, and so it just keeps everything nice and cool, and especially if I put ice cubes in there. So definitely have water on hand with you always. You want to stay hydrated when you're pregnant. Another big thing I would recommend, especially if you have hyperemesis, is to get a ton of sleep. And the way that I really learned about this was because my mom, when she was pregnant with me, she also had a really good friend who was pregnant around the same time as her, who also just so happened to have hyperemesis. So they could relate to each other really well, and it was helpful to them. However, the difference between the two was that my mom didn't have to go to work and her friend did work. And eventually her friend ended up having to be hospitalized. And so my mom just kind of always thought that that had something to do with the fact that my mom was able to rest pretty much always, whereas her friend had to really push herself to get to work and to keep going. And sometimes you just literally need to rest and lay down. And for me, I just needed to curl up into a ball, fetal position on the ground almost all the time in order to just make it through the day. And it sounds very dramatic and crazy, but that's what I needed to do. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to not have to work, because I think had I had to work, I probably would have been way worse off. Another thing that was helpful for me was to take a lemon and cut it and just sniff the lemon sometimes. I don't know what it was, but that particular scent happened to be soothing for me. Ginger, sometimes people will nibble on that. You could give that a try, but for me, it just grossed me out. However, lemons really helped, and then sucking on mints helped as well. And they sell these things called Preggy Pops, which are like suckers for pregnant women. And while I've never tried those, I did use these Yum Earth Organics suckers, and you can get them, I think, at some like Whole Foods type of natural stores, maybe other places, but I just ordered mine online, and I really like this pomegranate flavor, and it's called Pomegranate Pucker. Different flavors of these suckers, and they're certified organic, no artificial dyes, no nuts, vegan, peanut-free, soy-free, dairy-free, egg-free, fat-free. They should be flying because they're so free. But these are really good. They're a little more pricey than just your average Dum Dum, but they're really good. They're a little more expensive than your average Dum Dum, but you feel good when you eat them, and they're not, knowing that they're not like a bunch of sugars and cornstarch or whatever's in a Dum Dum. Tea is also excellent to keep on hand, especially if through your pregnancy you end up catching a cold. There's not a lot that you are really supposed to be using in terms of over-the-counter medicines and stuff, so having tea really helps. But just make sure that you look on the back of the tea that you buy, because some of them are not pregnancy safe. They'll have different herbs in them that could affect a pregnancy or that just haven't been tested with pregnant women. So make sure you check on the back just to be sure. Now, I'm not a doctor and I am not qualified to give any kind of medical advice, but there are two different medicines that I would suggest looking into. The first one is baby Tylenol, and that was what my doctors told me was like the one thing that was really safe to take. And I like it because it's a fever reducer. So anytime where I would get sick and I thought that I had a fever, I'd take my temperature and I'd immediately take the Tylenol to get that fever down, because you don't want your body temperature becoming too hot, because it's not good for the baby. So I just liked having it on hand, and so when I was sick in the wintertime during this pregnancy and with my son, I would take that, and it would just kind of give you that peace of mind that you're not overheating your baby, and it's a pretty safe thing to take. Another medicine, now this one is a prescription medication that I took, and it's called Diclegis. And for some people, like my mom, it didn't work all that well. For me, huge lifesaver. That was the way I was able to move around, do stuff again. It was fantastic. And while it isn't an absolute necessity, I do recommend the classic pregnancy book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. My mom had this when she was pregnant with myself and my siblings, and then she gifted me a copy too, and it just has pretty much everything you need to know about being pregnant and what to expect at different stages of your pregnancy and things that can go wrong if you're interested in looking into that. You don't want to scare yourself though, so just be mindful. If you're like me and you tend to get paranoid, maybe skip some of the scarier parts, but generally a lot of pregnancy resources are positive and exciting. And finally, I would recommend getting an app that tracks your pregnancy and follows you along the journey. There's a few different ones. For me, I didn't have a lot of storage space on my phone when I was pregnant with my son, so I would just every week I would Google, like if I was 30 weeks along, let's say, I would Google 30 weeks pregnant, and then I would look on a few different websites and read what they had to say, because I know the Bump and the What to Expect When You're Expecting website offer two different styles of writing and kind of give you two different feels for that week. So I would read those two, and it's just fun to have an app or go on a website and just be able to follow along the journey of what your baby looks like, and sometimes they'll compare it to the size of a fruit, which is really fun to do. And of course, taking your prenatals is important during this time, just to make sure you're getting enough vitamins and the nutrients that you need to support both yourself and your baby. So for the first trimester, that's mainly what I would recommend, just taking those health precautions and getting through it. There's not a lot of physical things you need to buy other than snacks, and you're making sure that you're taking your prenatals. If you have any beneficial first trimester tips you'd like to add, leave them in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and enjoy your week, and I'll see you in my next video.